Welcome to the Boardroom Soldiers, the podcast that talks to owner-operated businesses about identifying and eliminating business crime so that the honest can take their hard-earned money home. Today we have a very special guest, Briley, who I've walked personally a bit of a path with a couple of years ago, and seen as though it is Mental Awareness Month. Is that right? Mental health, yeah. Pierre and myself were just discussing a couple of weeks ago, some of the cases that we deal with and some of the complexities within the workplace itself, and just how life at times can, no matter what profession you're in, can just get you down. Now, Leanne is the owner of a very good and helpful a company called Be the Change Consulting. You are, by your definition, a recovery coach. I like to think of you more as a lifestyle coach, because that's kind of what you dealt with me on.
I'll take that.
And your work, and as I said, your work certainly reaches out and touches people in many different ways. You are not just confined to one arena in the mental health sector. You do work with other professionals, etc. So we thought, today would be, and this month would be an excellent idea for our viewers, listeners, to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. God knows, you just have to turn on the news every morning or read the newspaper if you just want to slumber back into that depression that we sort of bash through on a weekend, and then it all starts again on a Monday. So apart from the rugby at the moment, there seems to be very little else that we get any joy out of. But Leanne, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. It's always good having you, or seeing you. I haven't seen you for a while, but it's good seeing you. It's always good having guests who can share some really informative stuff with our people, and maybe by the end of this, you can also tap into Pierre's psyche, because I think he may require, having worked with me for the last 7 years, he may require a little bit of
just a little bit of help.
Yeah, a bit of breakdown.
I think a little bit is a bit of an understatement.
Recovering from Carl, right?
Yeah.
It needs its own recovery all on its own. All right, let's jump straight into it. Let me just first of all get an understanding here for everybody. We talk mental health. What is mental health?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, there's a lot of different elements to mental health, and a lot of people immediately want to jump to the kind of mental health disorders. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I've got PTSD, I've got bipolar mood disorder. Everybody's got a bit of that, I think, right? ADHD, ADD. But I think the idea of mental health, and why we have something like Mental Health Awareness Month, is it's about how well we are mentally. Not whether there's something right or wrong, just like how are we doing in terms of, like you say, what happens when we turn on the news, what happens when we read the newspapers, which I personally don't do because of the impact it has on my mental health and how miserable it can make me feel on a day-to-day basis. I think the only thing I watch is series and at the moment rugby, because of that enormous pressure of how the world is doing by starting off the day with watching the news or reading the newspaper. So I'm just in order to protect my mental well-being or my mental health, there's certain things I don't do. I do have a history of more anxiety than anything else. And then it's when you start looking at the mental health disorders, it's how do I manage that effectively so that we can show up in our personal and professional lives and just be well. Whatever that means, whether you're managing mental health through psychiatry or therapy or coaching or, lifestyle and exercise. It's different for everyone. But it's how do you feel mentally when you wake up in the morning? Are you ready to take on the day? Or do you feel oh, my word.
This anchor has got me to
right,
the bed.
It feels like I'm walking around with a 100-kilo invisible blanket on my head that nobody else can see but I can feel. And I think there are a lot of people kind of struggling under the yoke of that.
It is. And it's just interesting, going back to the rugby scenario. I was watching a breakdown last night, just over, it's a New Zealand-based program, with an ex-All Black by the name of John Kerwin, who struggled himself for many years with mental health issues in various aspects. And it took him the best part of his rugby playing career to realize that it was basically self-inflicted pressure.
Okay.
And then when it was all came to an end, when the rugby thing came to an end, he was lost and drifted around, not knowing sort of where your meaning in life is, what's your purpose, where's these crowds, and and he was talking now about specifically this World Cup, how the world at the moment is probably in the biggest mess that it's ever been, whether it's economically, whether it's just socially. I mean, there's wars everywhere, there's all the shit that goes on all over the place. And how something like a temporary a temporary sort of positive thing like the rugby that takes, in France's situation, has taken the French public and given them something else to stress about in a nice way.
Totally.
And we look at it here, South Africans. We know, if the Springboks are doing well, we're fretting on a Friday night, they scrape through on a Saturday, the bars are lit, the fires are going, everyone's happy. But then if you're a real fan, it starts again Monday, because the next thing is coming. But that's kind of a fun stress.
Yeah, and we all experience stress, and stress is something we all need in our life. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning and gets us going. There are too many people living under chronic stress.
Explain that. What is
it's
chronic?
Ongoing stress. It's not just something stressful happens and then it's over. It's like the drip, drip, drip of constant stress in our lives. It's work, it's finances, it's family, it's economics. And it's also what you're allowed to be. I mean, I can watch people lose their shit over Eskom.
Fuck.
But
Did she just say shit?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, well, you don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm on the Tim Ferriss podcast.
No, you can now say shit. I've said there.
Okay. So, and they're going crazy about Eskom and the potholes. You can make that your stress, or you can learn what you control and what you don't control. So we've got an upcoming election, and a lot of people will bitch and moan about the government for various reasons, but when asked if they're going to vote, they say no. So only control we have over the governments is whether we vote or not.
Correct.
46% of South Africans voted in the last national elections. It's not very much. Only 12 million of the voting population, which is 46%, voted. I know that I can control going to the polls and putting my cross on a ballot, but I can't necessarily control the fact that Eskom switched off the lights tonight. So what can I control? What can't I control? Mark Manson talks about it in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Thanks. In that, if you've got 5 things a day you can give a fuck about, what are you going to use that energy for? Are you going to worry about Eskom, or are you going to take it home and love your family with it? Because we all have a finite kind of mental capacity. And what do I want to use that mental capacity for? So even when we're under stress, chronic stress, ongoing stress, it's important what we choose to pay attention to. And I think a lot of people have kind of lost their way and are paying attention to giving all that attention to the pothole or the potholes that they skirted on the way home. So when they get home, they don't have energy for their kids and their partners. They're so tapped out, right? And that's where I think mental health is taking a real hit. Did you see what was in the paper this morning? I'm like, no. I know what's going on. I've got my eye on the bigger picture.
Some would say that's like an ostrich, though.
Well,
not that maybe is a bad thing.
It maybe makes me a happier ostrich, and I'll own that sometimes I am a bit ostrich-like, but I know what's happening in the world. And I know what's happening with our governments. I just choose not to get caught up in the minutiae of every single situation. Because if you read the papers, or you get caught in the kind of echo chamber of your socials, 4 hours later, you've been looking at horrible imagery of what's happening in and around the world, and you're not feeling that great when you turn off the light and you go to sleep.
No, that's the bizarre thing, I think, with us these days, especially, everyone now, I was going to say younger guys, but women, but social media is one of those things that's in your face.
All the time.
And growing up, when I grew up, if you didn't watch the news at 8 o'clock and then read the Sunday Times, you didn't really know much about what was going on.
No.
But you can't avoid it now. And that's I think an issue, and I think it's an issue. I'm concerned about the younger, like my daughter, for example.
Yeah, who's a teenager.
Who's now 50. Now I'm concerned what she's sort of exposed to in terms of negativity through social media. Where does that put her at 40?
Well, the problem is with that is kids, especially I think as we get older, we recognize that, the socials aren't what's going on in real life. I joke with my guys who I work with all the time, my clients, I'm like, I know what happens behind your social media feeds. I've seen it. Like what you see on social media is not real. But I'm 50 and I have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, and I'm not 15 being driven by emotion and like low dopamine levels, because teenagers will never have lower dopamine naturally than when they're teenagers. It's the lowest level of dopamine we experience in our lives.
When you're a teenager.
Yeah. And that's why teenagers are out for the big
Craving
hits.
it.
Right? The big hits. That's the sex, drugs, rock and roll, the risky behavior. We do it when we're teenagers because we're looking for dopamine hits. But we also don't have this like rational, reasonable brain. Yours is only about a year old. Because that part of our brain's only fully developed around the age of 25. So I'm driven by emotions and what my friends think and what I see on social media and what the latest TikTok or Insta influencer is saying, but I don't get to see your real life. And that's so dangerous.
That is dangerous.
But then how do you then deal with everyday stress? Because fine if you say, I choose not to read the newspaper. Because that's going to take me from a happy and joyful blasé mood and I'm happy about life to I'm getting in my car, I'm still happy, there's no traffic, I'm still happy, but I have to fill up and now my tank of gas cost me $200 more than what it did yesterday.
Absolutely.
So how do you not allow that to like just knock you down?
Well, it's all the things. So mental health is about all the things, or having good at mental health is all the things you do to take care of yourself. So part of the stress process, we have cortisol in our bodies. We've all heard about cortisol, ordinarily the stress hormone. But we need the stress hormone to get us out of bed. We need the stress hormone to kind of help us get our feet on the floor, go have our shower and our cup of coffee.
Literally get started.
Right. So it's like putting the key in the ignition and turning, if you want to use like what's happening with cars and petrol. But then what happens is our cortisol is sitting at these very high levels all day. There's no pill to drop cortisol levels in our body. What we do know is that exercise is one of the single best ways to reduce cortisol.
So cortisol, just for people who don't necessarily understand the technical terms,
Yep.
Would we call that the sad chemical?
Not at all.
Or the anxiety chemical?
Not at all. It's really that kind of juice that we need in order to go. It's a hormone.
Like an adrenaline flush?
Yeah, kind of like it's part of the adrenal system. So it releases during the day. Your cortisol should peak around lunchtime, early afternoon, and then it should start to drop off. So you can start to wind down for the day. So we could maybe live like farmers. Get up with the sunrise, go to sleep with the sunset. We've peaked around lunchtime.
Okay.
We need it. We've just got too much of it. We're not letting it drop off because we jump in our cars and we drive to work and we swear at the potholes and we flick off the government, and then we bang heads with our colleagues, and then we drive home in load shedding and we turn on the news and there are terrible things happening. We're not. A lot of us are not taking time out to. I do remember that you were very specific about getting to the gym every day.
Yeah.
You still like that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, pretty much. To take that hour off every day to exercise. Exercise is a brilliant way to reduce stress. It's just one of the really good things we can do to protect our mental health. Other things like people practicing mindfulness and meditation, having strong community. Like, do you have a good group of friends that you can like offload with, connect with? Spend some time with. What we want to try not to do too much of is spend that time with our communities and our people bitching and moaning about all the things that are going wrong in our lives.
So naturally you just want to, every now and again, remove yourself from everything shit.
Yep.
And put yourself into that happy world.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean it's, like my world is not made up of ponies and bunnies.
No.
You know, my world is a very real world
I was
where
gonna
I can
say.
get as depressed and miserable.
It's not all happy ostriches.
No,
No.
not at all. My world is made up of people, a lot of people around substance use, mental health, addictive behaviors that are really kind of grappling with how do I live in this world without picking up.
And there's an issue now for me. We're living in this high-stressed, high-pressured world that we're in. Whether you are 15 or whether you're 70, doesn't matter. Some things have just seemed to have got worse over the years for the world, and we're there. You are a counselor for recovering addicts or people who, I don't know if they're always recovering or addicts, etc.
Or addicts or people with dependencies or...
Do you agree then that, I mean, are people born addicts, or do people become addicted to a certain escape mechanism?
Okay.
In which case, this current world that we live in, for example, and the stress, you're going to see an increase of alcohol intake. You're going to see an increase of anxiety meds being distributed. You're going to see an increase in whatever, vaping and smoking, whatever. So is that what we've got to look forward to then?
Look, I think the one thing that I know about the work that I do is the neuroscientists, the psychiatrists, the researchers haven't found a gene for addiction. There's not an addict gene. Some people's genes are more susceptible to stress. And what happens when you're more susceptible to stress and somebody says, try this, have that. You go to your doctor, he says, you know, I'll put you on this medication. When we don't use substances or medications or alcohol in a healthy, balanced lifestyle, you leave yourself open for potential problems, because only between 10 and 20% of people who use substances of any sort type regularly will experience any form of abuse or addiction. So 80%, 90% of the world is out there. Totally, they're going to be fine. They're going to have a couple of drinks. Maybe they're going to overdo it at the well, it's coming up now, right? The Christmas parties, the silly seasons, but they're getting on with their lives. You know, what we need to be careful of is this idea that, you know, if I use substances to cope with my life, I'm going to become an addict. It just doesn't happen. There are a small percentage of people who do develop dependence or abuse, but not everybody.
So are you saying that there is truth to the people that always say, no, I don't really have an addictive personality?
I went to a psychiatrist many years ago when I was in treatment. I went to rehab in 2003, and he said to me, there's no such thing as an addictive personality. And it's kind of lived with me since then.
Did you agree with him, though?
Well, there's no proof for or against. So, like, what is an addictive personality?
Well, okay, fair.
Right?
Fair,
like,
but then what is addictive?
Well, there are a lot of things that are addictive. There's exercise can be addictive.
That's what I'm saying. So when someone says to you, there's no such thing as an addictive personality, I suppose, okay. But my argument to that, if argument's the right word, is I don't know if addictive's then the right word, but
excessive personality.
Maybe excessive. There's something I'll do excessively.
Right.
But that could be eating.
Or a drastic personality.
Yeah, or drastic,
yeah, maybe.
whatever.
I mean, and I'll use an example that this is just out there, but probably 80%, certainly of men, are then sex addicts.
Exactly.
Okay, and because you don't know too many that. And I'm not talking about in functional relationships. Now they've been married for 50 years. I'm just talking general, okay? 17 years old to 35 is probably can be then said he's a sex addict because he doesn't walk around saying no, because fussy doesn't fuck. Okay, we know that. It's my way of explaining it. But so he's
I miss you.
So therefore, one must say that he is, or her, to a degree, an addict. But I'm not saying that's an addict. What I'm trying to say is when a psychiatrist says to you, or a psychologist says to you, there's no such thing as an addictive personality. I don't know, because there may be something else that you really like to the extent that you do it a lot. And people say, like CrossFitters.
Yeah.
God, CrossFitters. I can't tell you. I'll insult the CrossFit community.
I know, you're a lifter, you're not a CrossFitter. You go to the gym, not the box.
And they have to go to the box And God, if they miss the box, then they'll put out an exercise plank at your bra.
You
so
just
that
are
they can do
75% of your corporate listeners.
yes, exactly. And the same as golfers.
No, I get it.
Golfers are addicted.
But the definition of addiction is more, I'm doing something that has a set of negative consequences,
so
and I
if it's
continue
positive-
with the behavior despite the negative consequences.
But
That's it then.
but
Sorry.
not with all addictions there are negative
No, that's what I'm
consequences.
Then
saying.
it's
Then
not
it's not an
addiction.
addiction. Then. You see what I'm saying?
But like you saying the example with the golf,
It's not an addiction if there are no negative consequences.
unless you didn't pay the bills this week because you paid your golf club
Totally,
fees.
bang on.
So you didn't pay your wife's or your kids' schooling.
so then golfing every Wednesday then becomes a habit, not an addiction.
So
If
when
as long
we
as it's
talk
not
about
negative.
addiction, we talk about continued use of a substance or engagement in a behavior despite ongoing negative consequences. So let's use gym.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning, say I'm a person in a relationship with 2 or 3 kids under the age of 10. And I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I go to the gym for 2 hours and I leave my partner at home to feed the kids, dress the kids,
Deal with all
take
of
the
the crap.
kids to school. I do the same thing in the afternoon. I'm not home at suicide hour, feeding time at the zoo, whatever you want to call it, and my partner is freaking out and stressing out and feels unsupported, and though I'm never there, those are negative consequences.
So it might not always be negative consequences for you, but it
might
negative
be-
circumstances that are
Yeah.
caused by your actions.
Relational, we look at relational consequences, health consequences, financial consequences. If I'm paying my green fees and telling my partner that I can't afford to pay the school fees, then there's a
Or
a
you
skewing,
lying about
whatever
how
it
much
is.
you're playing golf or whatever.
There's an
or
interesting,
how much
yeah?
you paid for your rifle scope.
Or what,
Well, that, yes.
that's
I've never lied
ah.
about that. No, that's-
It's this. It's if I'm doing something that is creating health and well-being and connection, and I'm doing it excessively, then this idea that it's an addiction. If I'm looking to lose myself, to numb myself, to zone out, to not feel connected, to almost anesthetize myself through a substance or a habit, then I've got to be prepared to say, hey, what's the impact on my mental health? You know, am I showing up in my life in the way I need to be showing up? Not for bunnies and ponies and all that sort of thing, but just like, am I being honest and open and realistic with myself?
a term you use.
Yes. It's scary that you remember.
No, I remember a few, but one of the terms I remember you always is sort of the relationship you have
Yeah.
with alcohol or the
Right.
relationship you have with cigarettes, etc. If that relationship is, if you're really honest and you look at it and say, is it a good or a healthy relationship?
Yeah, or is it toxic and dysfunctional?
Yeah. I know you always, I mean, when I came to see you, you said, well, okay, you know, you're going through issues, etc. How much do you drink? I said, listen, guaranteed Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, stop on Sunday, don't drink Monday, Tuesday. And you say, right, if you can function like that, you never said don't drink. Yeah, you never. And in fact, in all the sessions I attended, group sessions, etc., at the foundation clinic, where yes, there were people that have booked themselves in there because genuinely struggling from day to day with some form of addiction. You would, the message was never stop. You know, so you say you want to stop weed. Now you want to stop weed, that's fine, stop weed. But or you want to stop alcohol, make that decision. You never said to anyone that and like with me, you never said, well, if you're happy and it's you are not in any way being negatively or living negatively by not drinking, by drinking on a Thursday or Friday, fine. But then, you know, it gets to the point where if you really break it down, it's incredibly hard to do and live without negative impact.
Of course it is, because, you know, even a hangover after 3 or 4 or 5 drinks out with your mates is a negative consequence.
Yes.
But if you wake up and you feel shitty and then you don't go to work and you miss your first meeting of the day and you cancel your lunchtime appointment,
Then it's a negative
then
relationship.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
So you are saying if your environment, let's say work, causes you stress, mentally fatigued, and maybe it's by you convincing yourself that it's what it's doing, but you have your cigarette,
Yeah.
and you say, listen, if I don't have a cigarette now, I'm going to have a mental breakdown.
Okay.
Are you saying that's good?
Well, I'm not. Well, look, I'm not like. I don't think tobacco is a good thing. I don't think nicotine is a good thing. I don't think the smoking is.
Apart from the
health
medical consequences.
But if you're having 2 or 3 cigarettes a day, or you're going out and you're hitting your vape for 2 minutes, or you're going onto the veranda and you're doing 10 minutes of mindfulness, I'm going to say go onto the veranda at work and practice mindfulness for 10 minutes. If you can learn to do that. People go home and they have a whiskey or a beer. Okay, that's great. If that's what you need at the end of the day to relax, you could also go to an hour and a quarter yoga if you have time for it, right?
Yeah.
But
this doesn't do yoga.
Okay, this doesn't do gym at the moment either. So but it's like
if you can't do the dog pose or the tabletop.
downward facing dog for you. But if you get relief and release from a couple of cigarettes a day, you don't feel as harmful to yourself or others. You go home, you drink a glass of wine, you have a couple of beers, and you're still showing up in your life. Then great. I don't think drugs are the enemy.
No.
Like, I don't think like alcohol. I mean, I haven't touched a drink for nearly 16 years.
Because you broke your high heels coming out of
but
New Year's Eve party.
Is
woke up in a slumber the next day in mud full dress. I know the whole story. You see.
Right? If I'm not the person who goes home and has a drink at the end of the day. I'm the person who goes home and has 2 bottles of wine at the end of the day and then doesn't show up for work the next day. Then it's an issue.
So you're saying you need to control your escape mechanism?
Yeah, and for some people the escape is a double whiskey, and for some people it's 18 holes of golf. Yeah. Or maybe you go and you hit the box or the gym or whatever you do, and you're doing it in a healthy way. There are a lot of people in endurance sport who are ex-addicts because people are still looking for big hits.
You're still searching, exactly. You're still searching for that thing.
And isn't it better to be running marathons than to be smoking crack?
Yeah. No, look, I think, that's obvious.
You get healthier addictions.
But here's what another thing to do, and it has to do with business, in the business world.
Okay.
Addiction, going to that word again, can also manifest itself into overworking.
Absolutely.
Because you are the CEO or you feel the pressure of having to get things done. And, that's unhealthy as any other thing. If your family doesn't see you, you haven't been home for 3 days because you've just smashed out deadlines, etc., etc.
You're sleeping on the couch at work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of youngsters who look at that and go, that's a hard worker. Okay. That is somebody who's like, I aspire to be that person. Yet when you read Steve Jobs, you read these people, you go, hold on, these guys had no problem going off and taking a break or going out and smoking a joint with his wife or whatever, you know what I'm saying. But so even work, even the corporate environment has a line where things can become obsessive.
Absolutely.
And after I've found with our clients, after the whole COVID thing where a lot of companies closed and a lot of businesses shrunk and let people go, to a certain extent, there's a degree of clients, and these are mostly all executives, who are now working themselves dead.
Right.
To overcompensate, or to compensate for what was lost out during that 2.5, 3 year phase, and also to make sure that because the economy is so hard now, the business isn't closed.
I get that. And
it's a fear.
And it's a problem. It's a massive problem. Like, you want to talk about how we cope with burnout or stress, but it's also like what is causing the burnout and the stress. And there are a couple of things. As a CEO, you shouldn't be sending emails to your staff at 11 o'clock at night, because what you're saying to your staff is you should also be working at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. If I'm sitting at home sending out emails and answering, you should also be doing this. So I'm modeling this like burnout culture to my people, right? Put a timer on your emails. Schedule them to go out first thing the next morning, So leadership needs to also be very mindful of how am I showing up. Because I'm working 16 hours a day, am I sending the message that you also need to be working 16 hours a day and sleeping on your couch and getting here before dawn?
It's a difficult thing, though.
Of course it is.
Because there is a degree, and I suppose it depends what work you're in or what line of business you're in, but we all, as business owners, or if you're a higher level of management in a company, you want your staff or you want to feel that you're getting your pound of flesh, so to speak. They committed, they're doing their thing, they're there. So you don't want to, you're right, I hear what you're saying. You don't be sending them emails at 11 because you're creating that culture. But the other side to it is you kind of feel, I don't want to leave here early on a Friday as the boss, because I'm creating that culture that, we can all leave at 10 on a Friday because he plays golf at that stage. We should go shopping or whatever the case.
Absolutely. But
so it is a weird, I know the mind is a weird thing.
Very weird.
The way we read a situation. I mean, there's this new word, there's a buzzword out now called, it's probably not new, but quiet quitting. Have you heard about quiet quitting? Where basically you rock up to work, you sit at your desk, and you do your thing. And it's waiting till 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, pack your bag, and off you go. And you do this day in, day out, 365 days a year, and you get a paycheck. And you've quit in terms of invested interest, etc. You just make sure you're a body and you're there. So it's not healthy for the person or the business.
No, it's not. But also, like, I understand the idea. You want your pound of flesh. You want to make sure your people are working and showing up. But let's work in the contracted work hours. If I'm contracted to work from 9 to 5, let's make a way for me to work hard and smart from 9 to 5 so that I don't have to be going home, kissing my partner, having some dinner, and then sitting down at my laptop again for another 3 or 4 hours at work. And that's about systemic and organizational wellness. And unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, it doesn't exist. I mean, I don't know what your organization is like.
Okay, well,
you're working 18 hours a day.
Yeah, well, hold on. Okay, so, that's why I said it depends. I mean, when you're doing investigating...
I get it.
There are no hours.
There's no hours, per se, because crime doesn't say we'll stop at 4.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And if you look at, like, for example, what Pierre and his team do, a huge percentage of the stuff has to take place after hours.
Okay.
Because where do you find suspects you're looking for at home? Not in the day.
Okay.
So you can see how this rolls over into...
And what happens if you're out late at night and you're on a job and you need to go in late the next day because you were out till 4 o'clock in the morning? Is there wiggle room to do that?
Yeah.
But that's more well in an organization. The unwellness would be, we've been on a job since 4 o'clock. Now I have to clock in at 9. No excuses, no reasons why I didn't have to do that. I'm expected to give 18 hours a day to my job.
No, look, it might be one of my addictions, but I have no problem working.
I get it.
And I have no problem driving to Durban for an investigation that starts tomorrow morning, even though it means I give up my sleep.
Okay.
But the plus side is, though, and I have to give credit, but maybe not credit. It's expected to a certain degree from my side. But if I'm working today from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I have to go suspect hunting in some Soweto environment, and I'm only getting home at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock the next morning, then I know Kyle is not expecting me at work at 8 o'clock.
Okay, well, there you go.
I know, and he knows, don't phone Pierre before 10 o'clock because he's probably sleeping.
But therein, Pierre, is what you said it. Because of the nature of that, I mean, this isn't a perfect world. So the nature of what you do, you go out suspect hunting. There are particular times where you're on the hunt, and this just keeps going and going. And you could go 2 days.
Many times.
Yeah, so it's not a case of you just think, it's gone past 2, I'm finished now.
But it's the
No,
nature
but I don't do that.
You signed on for this. Is what you do as an investigator.
Yes.
And you run with that.
And I fully knew that from the beginning.
But I still balanced though, because you get enough other side to that.
Leave
Yes.
or
Where,
downtime.
or like you'll say to me, I'm not coming in today because I want to sort out these reports.
Yes.
It's not going to bother me because
Right.
I know I can trust you.
Yes.
And I know what you're doing. I also know that if you phone and say, I'm actually just going to sleep,
Yes.
I'm going to say, okay.
You're going to be okay with that.
So, but that's investigating.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about sort of, I look at many of the clients that we deal with who's their admin or their
like
staff.
banking, finance, insurance.
But
like you
it's
go
just an
in.
interesting thing, this concept of, especially now that people are working maybe more from home.
And people work harder. the whole thing about COVID is a lot of people actually worked harder because there wasn't the 45-minute drive to work and there wasn't the 45-minute drive home. So instead of driving to work and driving home, I spent that extra hour and a half at my computer working.
Well, it's I don't know, and maybe you can explain this phenomenon, but I know a lot of people set it as an excuse to keep, having the perk of working from home.
Yep.
But a lot of the times when I guess everybody just has a lot of work sometimes to do, deadlines to catch up on, reports to write. Often I will just phone Kyle. It might be 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock. And I'll say to him, listen, I'm not coming in. I'm staying home and I'm working on this report. I feel like I get more done, maybe twice as much as productive. Even though me being at home, I sit my laptop on the couch, I go make coffee, make something to eat, 2-minute noodles, whatever, quick lunch, and then I'm back at doing my work. But I feel like I get like double the work done than what I'm exactly the same desk space, but at the office I'm just not getting it done.
But it's fine if you can self-manage. People are burning themselves out.
Self-manage.
It's fine if you can self-manage and take care of yourself, but people are burning themselves out. We have 168 hours in the week. If you add 7 times 24, we have 168 hours in the week. That's all we have. Some people don't have 178, some people have 152. Just that we all have the same amount of time, and a lot of us are doing a trade. Time for money, time for money, time for money.
You personally.
Yes. I'm a terrible example of a well person.
No. Oh, yeah, no, I know. Jeez, I mean, that's like, I love working with you now because you see, it takes crazy to know crazy.
Thank you.
In our world, it takes thieves to know thieves, they say.
Okay.
But no, hold on. What I was getting at was you have that, we all have this terrible cell phone. But you've got people's lives on the other side of the phone. I mean, I'm not going to get a call, Pierre's not going to get a call saying, I'm about to swallow this bottle of pills. Okay? Your partner, he knows what you do.
Yes.
He signed up for that. But do you have a point where you say, there's a point at night, I'll turn this off? Or
yes.
do you, I can't turn it off because what happens if Jill phones me and...
So, very good. My phone rang at 9:30 last night and I didn't answer it. It's 9:30 at night. If you've used substances, if you're in trouble, I cannot be your only go-to person. I have very strong boundaries. When I work from...
Hopefully you tell them.
They know, but my clients know. But if a client phones me at 9:30 at night, I shouldn't be the only person on their call list. I cannot solely take responsibility for your mental health.
Your mind to be tough enough, love on that. And say,
well, it's not tough love. It's me taking care of myself. Okay. It's not tough love towards you. It's self-love towards me. I cannot be on call 24/7, 365. I just can't. I am not at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night when somebody phones me. They've potentially used substances, and you're in a line where I'm sure you've spoken to people under the influence. You might as well be speaking to a wall, because nobody's listening to you anyway. People need to have their faculties about them to have a sane and sensible conversation. So I take care of myself after hours. I don't send out emails at 11 o'clock.
To be the best you the next day.
Yeah, so that I'm resourced and resilient and mentally well enough to go back into work the next day and say, okay, what needs to be taken care of today? What are we looking at today? How can I support you today?
But how do you get there?
So I do things like meditate.
After hours?
Well, I meditate.
Like a 10-minute break.
I will meditate in the evenings at the end of my workday. I've gone back to meditation practice. I try and do that. I am in my own form of therapy and counseling, which I think we should all be in. I read, I personally develop, I listen to a lot of podcasts on things like mental health and optimization. Even Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week 20 years ago, is saying maybe it was a bit befork. Maybe we can't all be optimizing all the time. Maybe sometimes we have to put our feet up on the deck chair and say, you know what, for the next week I'm not available. If I go and leave, I will uninstall WhatsApp from my phone.
Will you?
Yep.
You are non-contactable
if you want to phone me, you have to actually make the effort to pick up the phone and call me, not just like shoot off a message
Okay, I
or
see what
send
you're
me a
saying,
voice. It takes an extra level of effort for someone to pick up the phone. WhatsApp is like easy access all day, every day. I am tapped into you and you are tapped into me, and I expect you to get back to me immediately. I have no blue ticks on my WhatsApp.
Thank
I
you.
have no what last seen. I
Thank
have
you.
no online, because if I read your message at 10 o'clock at night, and I don't want to get into a conversation with you now, I'll answer you in the morning. And that's a self-preservation tool. I block my social media at night. True story. I have an app blocker.
When you started,
I block
did you do that?
down
though?
my socials. These are all things I've started to do, because for me, social media is
Yeah.
like this. It's total zone out, an anesthesia, whatever, that I can just scroll through through Insta or whatever for hours, not think, not cognate, so I don't do it. I should rather be using that time to sleep or rest or whatever.
Do something productive or
Well,
whatever.
or even not. Just do nothing. Like instead of
Yeah,
scrolling through
there we go.
instead of scrolling till 11 o'clock at night, going to sleep at 10.
I
Right.
do a thing, though, that some would say, what do you do? Typically, let's say a Saturday afternoon, I actually do not, I don't read, I don't do anything. I sit and I just like blank out for, I literally would be the description of, and I'm not even talking, the TV's not even on.
Zoned out.
I'm like zone out. I just sit there. And my daughter will say, "What are you doing?" And I'm just nothing. I'm just sitting here. And 3 hours can pass doing that.
Amazing.
But
Non-sleep, deep
it's
rest.
just, I couldn't be bothered to engage. My mind's never stopping anywhere. It's like,
Yeah.
it feels like it's always racing. You know what that feels
Yeah.
So it just sits. So yeah, like zoning out. So it's not always having to do something. Like
So
meditate
do
or-
you? Is that your meditation?
No, well, I don't know what it
Maybe.
is. It could be. It could be, but it's just, I'll stare around at different things, and it's like just my head will jump all over the place.
And does time pass?
Yeah, it just passes.
You can get into a flow. It's
You-
like
you-
flow states.
It's a thing. It
We
happens
call
to
it
me.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. So Andrew Huberman, who's a Stanford
Yeah,
professor,
yeah.
you know, the Huberman Lab, he'll talk about non-sleep deep rest.
Yes.
Sitting
okay.
there zoned out, non-sleep
Yeah,
deep
it's just like
rest.
zones out. You've walked into my office, you'll see me.
Okay,
I'll
so-
just be-
so
I'll be
for
sitting
the-
and you'll say, "What are you doing?" And I'll just be, it's just.
Okay, so for the layperson, it would be the equivalent of sitting at a bonfire and just staring at it.
Yes,
Yes,
staring into the fire.
Yeah, or at the sea
Staring-
on the
Because
coast.
I couldn't relate with just sitting on my couch.
Okay, but he's
And
weird
staring
and
at my
old and-
ceiling.
Yeah, it's an age thing.
But I can
You're a
sit
gamer.
around.
You're a gamer. So you I can't picture
You're a
spending
gamer.
11 hours going like this.
You're a gamer.
Yeah.
That's your
I used to
zone
be a
out.
big gamer,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's the only thing I'm thinking about right now is the game, is my position, is my strategy, is whatever. I'm totally present with this. And the game developers and the app developers know that. They have neuroscientists. I don't know if you've watched The Social Dilemma.
Yes, I have.
They have neuroscientists working on how do we get as much of this person's attention
Yes.
as we possibly can.
It's very interesting.
Alcohol, drugs, gaming, porn, sex. I want to just circle back to the idea of sex addiction. Like, I like sex a lot and I have a high sex drive. It's not the same as I'm stopping. I drove past the corner here, the Lollipop Lounge.
Aptly, you chose the spot well, I've got to say. You
Right,
just
the
tell
Lollipop
Gavin.
Lounge, I'm like, wow, they actually, you know, if I have a sex addiction, I'm the guy driving past, stopping at the Lollipop Lounge, getting a hand job on my way to my business meeting. That's sex addiction.
But you go there for the wings.
Oh, is
The
that
ribs,
why you
yeah,
go?
watch out for the ribs and the chicken.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
nice
that
food.
sort of thing.
Yours,
You know,
the food's good.
I'm stopping, I'm watching porn for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. That's sex addiction. I like to have lots of sex. That's not sex addiction. I have a high sex drive or
When
a
it
strong
starts to
libido.
become a
yeah.
thing.
Oh, so, you know.
So here's,
Again.
this will interest you. It's a part of Pierre's job.
Okay. I thought you were going to say part of Pierre's problem.
No,
well,
it's becoming a problem because
you
this
can
is now-
look at
I've
it
got to
two
start-
ways.
I've got to start worrying about his mental health because what he's seeing. We talk
Okay.
PTSD, but I'm talking
Okay.
here. He's getting porn TSD because
Yo.
what happens is one of the functions we do during an investigation when required is Pierre does cell phone and computer forensics. So he will have to go in and assess, download, extract evidence on whatever frauds happened or whatever's gone on.
Totally legitimate.
They're all
Yes, I know.
legitimate.
I have a client who
Above
was
board.
also a forensic.
So that's what he does a lot of. The problem with that is the mind cannot, or the eyes can't block out what comes up.
Right.
And not just before you continue, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not always that I'm looking for a picture of a gun and all of a sudden there's a chick with her boobs out. Sometimes the case relates to, is my wife having an affair?
Right. And I'm sure
Is-
there's lots of that.
It can sometimes channel towards that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have to look for it.
But it's just, but what I'm
The
saying
prevalence.
is the amount of items that he finds, video clips, etc., that he gets and sees is astonishing.
On
When
the
you-
work computer, nogal.
Work phone, work computer, personal, it's crazy. And that's what I'm saying. It's like you start to become almost like, I mean, we have to have these light-hearted joking sessions because otherwise he will be scarred.
Well, also,
Because some of it is
like,
pretty scarred.
We'll show you the frog.
no, thanks. Anybody in your line of work, anybody who needs to debrief. I think one of the biggest problems with things like JMPD, the SAPS, is the lack of debriefing, the lack of counselling, the lack of support. These guys, these men and women are out on the streets. You as investigators, I have clients that work in private security, all sorts of things. There's no debriefing.
Well, for me,
I've got a client who's in EMT. There's
Yeah,
very
them-
little debriefing, so people are
absolutely,
traumatized.
Absolutely. I find these days in security, particularly your armed response personnel, are hugely uncatered for when it comes to that, where there's actually responding to more houses of violent crime than police are, because there's more of them.
And they're responding
and
quicker.
they're effective.
Yeah.
Okay. So they are responding to, they're seeing more violent. They get first on scene to a murder, first on scene
Yeah.
to a beating, first on scene to a robbery. Very few of them go through any debrief process
Okay.
or a counseling process.
And that's the
And-
responsibility of the organization.
Absolutely it is, but to many it will be like it costs money, etc. Or for whatever reason, the management may not see the necessity. Yeah, they ask the person, "Are you okay? You're right."
Yeah,
I'm fine.
No, I'm fine. I mean, I personally, the way when I've been involved in shootings, etc., it's been a very different. My way is different to Pierre's way, for
Yeah, of
example.
course.
And yes, so I might say I'm fine, and I might generally think I'm okay. He might say he's fine, but it's been sissy to say I'm not.
Well, in my world, FINE stands for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So, I don't like it when
Yeah,
people
well,
tell me they're fine.
They're fine. Okay, so there we go.
And everybody does cope with it in different ways and have different tools and levels of resilience. But it's not, but this is like such an important point. You're not a sissy to put up your hand and say, that
I
was
need
a
help.
lot for me to cope
This
with.
is why.
Whether you're in corporate or you're in the security forces or you're in the military or you're a trauma surgeon or an EMT or whatever you are, I'm not okay. What I saw is terrible. I'm impacted and affected by it. I have a young client who's an EMT and there are lots of DOAs. They're walking into scenes it's so important for us to create this culture where it's like, it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
I'm under a lot of pressure. I saw something really terrible. Somebody said to me the other day, I've seen people shot and killed in front of me. And I'm fine. I was like, but that's not normal. It's not even normal. I've lived in South Africa pretty much my whole life. I've never seen someone shot and killed in front of me. Even in a country with high levels of violence, it is not a normal thing to witness.
No, it's not normal.
And we're not fine after we've seen stuff like that. We're not fine after we've been subjected to violence or GBV or a hijacking, or we're not fine.
But
we might think we're fine, and we still need support.
do you also think that for some, I'm not saying for
Yeah.
everybody, but for some working in armed response, and they want to see those things because it gives them,
Well, it's
that's the thing that makes them alive.
Bing, 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 adrenaline. I have a client who worked frontline medical in COVID who is feeling the effects still after COVID. And their thing was, it was exciting to go to work. Because it's like being a war medic.
Yes, you
You
get to see
know,
body parts flying out of
EMTs,
cars.
I think there are-
CSOs,
There's
whatever.
people who are predisposed to that, to whatever life. The soldiers.
But over time, it's
It's
still
still
going to
gonna
have
have an effect.
Impact.
I mean,
you might be better at dealing with it
But
after
it still
40
has.
years.
It still has.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And in different industries, that stress comes in different ways. So if you work for one of the big banks or the private finance houses, you're not seeing body parts flying out of cars.
No,
but you're being subjected to a different level of stress.
You're seeing houses being repossessed
Right.
and families...
People losing their belongings, people losing jobs, all this sort of thing. Like, as a country, as a world, we are not fine.
No.
We are under enormous stress all the time. We are walking around overly charged, primed. That's why people lose their shit so quickly. Just go to like Pick and Pay on a Friday afternoon and watch people lose their shit for the smallest little reasons. Get irritated with tellers and call center agents and shout and scream. That's not normal. That's people with unhealthy outlets for their stress and tension. They shout at each other in the workplace. People go home and cry at the end of the day because my boss was such an asshole to me. That's not normal. You know, there are a lot of people who are traumatized. Big T traumas, the ones that are obvious, and then the small T
So
traumas.
I want to say, it's not always trauma. When we say PTSD, it's not always death, or
No.
it can be a lot of other things.
We talk about big T traumas are things like, you know, death, loss, abuse, violence. But then there's also the small T traumas, things we didn't get. Care, nurturing, attention we didn't get, especially as children. So we grow up with these things and then we look for ways to fill
Or your
the gaps.
dad never told you he loves you or something
Right,
like that.
or my dad always goes to watch my brother play rugby, but he never comes to watch
Yes,
me
and
play rugby.
and
That's a small T trauma.
And it's funny because I've just from my life experiences, have seen and know people who suffer more from small T trauma, if that's what you call it,
Yeah,
small T,
small T traumas.
than anything major.
Right.
It was just small things that they've held on to, and they just cannot get over it. And it ruins relationships, it ruins friendships. And you kind of think after, get over it. I mean, it happened when you were like, you know.
But we carry those childhood patterns for a long time, and that's why I think everybody should be in coaching, counseling, therapy or something.
I do agree, having been there, I do agree with you.
Right, it's like, you know what? So my dad dies, he disinherits my brother, and I, for a woman I have never met, and that is a trauma in my life. Now, as a recovering addict myself, I can go and drink, okay, or I can go and seek counsel, wisdom, support, you know, get myself back on track in a different way, because I've created a set of resources for myself, and in doing that, I'm more resilient when it comes to difficult things. Even my father dying and doing that is not a trauma, though. You know, it is a shitty thing that happened in my life, but we've also got to be careful of every time something crappy happens to us going, oh my God, I was so traumatized.
Yes,
oh my God, I was so traumatized.
I fall back on this thing.
You know, this idea that there's, you know, if you went home and your husband beat the crap out of you, or you saw someone shot in front of you, or, you know, even, I mean, things like retrenchment and job loss can be like difficult and challenging, but not everything bad that happens to us is a trauma, right? There's also this idea that we are traumatized as people, you know, but we've also got to be careful of kind of falling into the trauma trap of everything's a trauma, everything's a trauma. You know, I went to the shop and somebody shouted at me and I'm so traumatized. Not you. No, you're not. You went to the shop and somebody crapped on you, or a driver flipped you off.
You know, we've had them at work.
You know,
it's raise your voice and it's, oh, they're
It's not we've had, we still have.
Yeah.
That's not trauma. That's like I'm dealing with challenging and difficult situations in my life, and I need to resource myself in a way that I can cope, or make some decisions to change some things. Not, oh my God, work. My boss shouts at me and I'm so traumatized. Well, if your boss screams and shouts and rants and raves at you every day over and over again, sure. But, you know, everybody loses their shit every now and again. It doesn't mean I'm, like, traumatized. We've got to be very careful. I can see your notes, like that idea of PTSD. Real PTSD is sounds, flashbacks, imagery, you know, of things that have happened to you in your life. Waking up feeling like you are back in the scene. I've seen people with real PTSD.
The new word for it is triggered.
Triggered is I'm having an emotional response to an internal or external stimulus. That's all a trigger is. It's what's kept us alive, with great respect to your listeners and to yourselves, for however long we lived on the plains of Africa, Asia, South America, whatever. To be triggered is my body feels like it's under threat and I need to survive. But My boss walking into my office and shouting me, I don't need to survive that. I just need to move
You need
through
to
it.
get through it, yeah.
Our brain is like, shit, threat, danger, you're going to die. But most of the time, unless you've got somebody pointing a gun at you, and maybe that's happened in your line of work, you're not going to die because your boss shouted at you.
Yes.
Our brain perceives threat at a survival level, not, oh, it's just Carl in a bad mood. It's like threat, alert, what do we need to do to survive? You know?
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
And this is
This, by the way,
a
is your
genuine
last question, so I've got to wrap this up.
okay. It's my last question,
Stay
but
here.
it's an important
We
one.
could be here all day.
And
otherwise.
this is for all the viewers out there. If you are still watching or listening to this by now, congratulations. You are not one of those people that say, fuck that, mental health is for sissies. And
Thank God.
I'm referring to maybe a generation, the silent generation, or the people, the older people that say, we don't talk about those things, and we don't talk about this and that. And then you get the complete opposite of the girls or the whoever's that say, I'm triggered by everything. But now, how do you get someone that, let's say in your family, you know that this guy is seriously struggling, he needs help, but he's one of those that say, I'm fine, I don't need help.
He's the
trauma
denier.
he's the denier. How do you get someone like that
The
to
only-
where
okay.
we are now?
So can I be quite honest? It's really good that big, tall, rough and tumble security guys such as yourself, tattooed and like bearded and all that thing, seriously are having these conversations, because the modeling of that is you are not a sissy if you're not okay. You know, it's this idea that we're all soft and pink and fluffy and like, oh, let's sit and talk about our feelings. You know, boys don't cry and man up and all that sort of thing. And there's a very strong narrative of that in our country. I've got a client who says to me the other day, a man's only allowed to cry when he loses his mother or a litre of blood. Right?
Yeah.
Nas Border said cowboys only cry in front of cowboys don't cry in front of their horses.
Yeah.
You know, this narrative. So guys like you being out there saying, hey, like, it's okay to not be okay. You're having a bad day, you know, like, let's sort you out. Let's get you some debriefing. Let's get you some counseling, you know, with the clients that you work with that have actually been some of them in traumatic situations, you know, saying to them, you know, there is help available. And I think it's the narrative of there is help available is better than are you okay? Because
that's, yeah,
when you
that's
ask
it.
people, are you okay? Everybody's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, I don't know how you're feeling, but if you need anything, here's a number, here's a business card, here's someone you can get in touch with just to talk, you know, just to debrief, just to go through whatever you're going through. And, you know, in the corporate space, there are all these EAP programs. There's ICAS, there's, you know, there's Alexander Forbes that all run these lovely wellness programs. People don't use them. They don't trust them. Go use your EAP program. It's confidential. ICAS, who's the biggest one in South Africa, all the banks belong to ICAS. You probably know them.
No, please, what is ICAS?
ICAS is like an employee assistance program that a lot of the big banks and, you know,
Okay.
corporate organizations, you can see a counselor, you can speak to a coach, you can go to, on the company's dime.
It's a wellness
Yeah, it's
program.
a wellness provider.
That's
People
awesome.
don't use it because they're scared that they're going to feed back to the
Well, yeah,
bosses,
and you're gonna
but
be-
they don't.
You're gonna, there's gonna be a stigma attached. to
No,
this whole
but
thing. So-
because it is a completely confidential thing. If you contact ICAS and say, I'm struggling at work, I'm under stress, I need to speak to someone, they're not going to send a summary to your boss to say,
This
you
is
know,
what's going
Carl
on in the
came
life
to
of
see
Leanne.
us and this is what happened. It's not like that. And you pay for it. You pay a little bit out of your salary, the company pays a little bit, and everybody, I know that most of the big banks, for example, Transnet, people like that, are all members. They've got 60% of I think it's 60% of the wellness in the country, but people don't use it. What if they think I'm weak? What if they find out? What if your boss just finds out you're human? Then what the fuck?
What would you say, or maybe you do this, so let me rephrase that. What is your opinion on a company, and I'll say, like, let's say our company, let's say DLK, right?
Right.
Has and now I've got to be careful of the word, a therapist, a counselor, somebody, a talker to person, who comes in once a month for 15-minute chit-chat session with 10 different staff members on their own.
Why not?
Does that happen?
I don't know of anywhere personally off the top of my head that's doing that. I know there are some companies that run wellness days. Everyone's like, oh, we're not well, but let's just put our head down and grind through it. That family member who's not doing so well, the only thing I know is like, hey, I'm here to support you. If you need anything, give me a shout. You know, life is tough. A lot of people are in denial. I'm fine. Head down, let's keep going. But that same guy's going home and drinking a bottle of brandy before he goes to bed at night, or disappearing, to the gym for 4 hours or whatever, because he actually or she actually isn't okay. We can't make people do anything. All I know from my work is that I can say, hey, I'm here if you need me. Like, give me a shout. Here's my number. Call if you need some help.
The first step is to admit you have a problem.
Right, anything like that. I don't have a problem. Do you have a problem?
No.
Right, exactly. And to be like, hey, these are the resources we have available. We trust these resources. We use these resources. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the CEO who sends out emails at 11 o'clock at night. I make use of these services. I've got someone I talk to. Let's model that with one another. And there are a lot of people out there in the world who are putting up their hands, which also makes a difference, and saying, hey, I have a therapist, I have a mental health issue, I'm working with bipolar or anxiety, depression or whatever it is, and I'm putting up my hand before I turn into another one of the, the statistics around mental health suicide. SADAG, I don't know if you know SADAG, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, they run a phenomenal service. You can pick up the phone, you can phone them, they will link you to resources, counselors, therapists, hospitals, programs, social workers, whatever you need. Like it's a sponsored service, so you don't pay, they pay. I don't know how it works. I think they have counselors 24/7, 365. Lifeline is another one. They might not be able to help you there and then, but they'll be able to help you link to the resources that you need. Help contain you, help, talk you through a difficult situation. But if we're going to be okay, we've got to learn to put up our hands and say, I am not okay. And I've learned how to do that. I am not okay. I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I am burned out. I need a little support. And, it feels a little weird and vulnerable and like, what are people? But I don't know. There's a nice saying out there that your opinion of me is none of my business. So I don't really care what you think if I know I'm doing the next right thing for myself. I give lots of time and energy to my clients, but when I go home at night, I need to give time and energy to me. It's funny you should ask, because I have a WhatsApp group where I communicate with my group, and I sent them a message this morning to say, hey guys, I'm available during office hours. Reach out, talk to me. Please remember I don't answer my phone after hours, out of respect for myself and my partner. Because otherwise I'll be on the phone all night, every night, chatting to people, talking them off, whatever. And I cannot, and I say this to my people all the time, I cannot be your only port of call. Have other people, And it doesn't have to be a counselor, a therapist, or it can be a pastor or an imam or a rabbi or a lay counselor in your community congregation, or a mentor or a friend. It doesn't have to be someone. It's just got to be someone who can listen and say, wow, sounds like you're going through some real stuff at the moment. Not, I think you should do this. And this is a big thing with that family member again. I think you should do this, and I think you should do. It's like, tell me what you need from me. Like, what can I do to support you? Because there's going to be lots of wailing and gnashing of teeth if the Springboks lose on Saturday night, right? And then the country will be in a slump again, and we'll be back to mediocre mental health. It's like, what do you need from me? Oh, I need support. Okay, tell me what support looks like to you. What is it exactly that I can do to help you right now? I just need you to go for a cup of coffee with me and sit and listen to me for 45 minutes. Great. Let's set it up. Can we go and play a round of golf together? Yeah, I've got some stuff going on in my marriage. Awesome. Like, tell me when.
I like that idea of just, what do you need from
What do you need?
Instead of, I'm telling you, now that you've told me you've got a problem, this is what you should do.
People don't like to be, most of us are like autonomous adults. We like our autonomy. We don't like being told what to do. You've seen it with your clients. The minute you start telling your clients what to do, they're like, fuck you, I'm the boss of me.
It's just a very simple thing. I mean, when you do sales 101, one of the first things you're taught is, stop selling to the client and just ask him what he wants.
Right.
Because he's selling himself what he wants. He's
Exactly.
buying, which is the same thing. I mean, if we're going to sit and talk, if I'm going to say to you, all right, Pierre, you've got the problem. What can I do to help? You say to, well, it would be nice if I had a computer that worked. Then I'll say, okay.
Oh, okay, cool. We can sort that out.
No, I think you should stick with the abacus and do your maths on paper.
And get some smoke signals going, my friend.
So what I'd normally say to you, smoke more cigarettes. Get over it. But, but no, okay. So, Leanne, just in closing, I know you've got to get back to helping the world and
helping those people that come to sit in that circle around the fireplace every day.
Which I'm a big fan of, actually. I must come back and just.
You should come and say, how's it?
It's always so difficult because you don't want to rock up there, because I'm the type of guy who will rock up there and say, when we're done here, does anyone want to go for a drink? And
Right.
Wrong place.
As long as it's a Coca-Cola, my friend.
But no, I'm a big fan of that open talking environment, and where the person who sits in the corner silently for 3 weeks suddenly says something. There's a lot to be said for it, and I'm a huge fan in what you do, and for people that do what you do. I do think that we don't have enough of it.
I think we should have these spaces in organizations, like once a week, once a month, let's circle up and just talk about what's going on for us.
Yeah.
Not about work, not about but people are scared to do it because what happens if my boss thinks I'm a loser, and what happens if my CEO thinks I'm weak, and
I think we do need more of it, and that's so today's episode was to just discuss these, because I don't think it's discussed enough.
And what I love about the podcasting forum is there is more discussion going on about it. There's some great podcasters out there, yourselves included, of course, that are talking about stuff like this and bringing it into the public eye and saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Put up your hand before you burn out, before you do something ridiculous. Before you put the gun in your mouth, like with there is help available, and it's non-judgmental and it's supportive, and nobody's, just because we have mental health disorders, it's a long time since we use things like insane and crazy, and we talk about psychiatric facilities and mental health practitioners and professionals. It's not a loon. What somebody said to me the other day, the insane asylum. I'm like, are you serious? Like, we're not living in the 70s and 80s anymore, right? I think Grundaki still exists. So there's some very good, very professional help. And if and a lot of people in corporate have this real privilege. You have more benefits on your medical aid for it than you think you do. You know? So there's also that, but I'm only on a hospital plan. It's like, that's okay. Speak to your broker or speak to someone.
There are ways to work around that.
You can flip your psychiatric inpatient into psychiatric outpatient, and it's a PMB.
Okay.
Prescribed. So there are ways to get help. A lot of people are like, but I don't have it. There are free programs. There are mental health, SADAG. They have all sorts of group support processes. Reach out, or even be the person in your organization who says, hey, why don't we get together and talk about wellness and well-being, and like how we can just be like weller. I know weller's not a word, just saying,
make it a word.
But it's but it's lovely to see guys like you driving conversations like this, because it's really, really important. Your friends are like, I heard you talking about mental health, Brew. Like, fuck, what's that about? It's like, it's a real thing.
We had friends, but
but you work too freaking hard, and that's your problem. That you all work and no play, and and it's important to find some sort of flow, not balance. I don't think anyone has balance, but some sort of. When last did you do something fun that wasn't work?
The weekend I went shooting.
Okay, great, brilliant. I I hope you had fun.
It was so much fun.
There you go. Good release. Healthy. You know, some people are saying
It's not healthy for the bank account, though.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
it's better than my bank account. That's got to pay for cars that get damaged because my healthy fund is drink and drive.
Listen, you're the last one that had an accident, so
Exactly.
don't talk
Right,
too
exactly.
much.
So healthy fun. Healthy fun is important,
You
whatever
can only
that looks
publish
like.
this podcast after my insurance claim is paid out.
All right, because if the insurance broker hears that,
Yes,
he'll be
hold
like,
it. What did you just say?
or just like cut that out completely.
So, all
right.
right. Leanne, there are people out there who
There really are.
going to want to talk to someone like yourself. How do they contact you?
So they can find me on bethechangecoaching.co.za. All my details are on there, my cell phone, my email. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Insta, I'm on LinkedIn, as much as I love socials.
You're on all of
I'm
those.
on all of them. And yeah, just to, people, just to reach out. My WhatsApp, I might not answer people immediately, but if people reach out to me, I always get in touch.
Yes, you
It
do.
takes a lot of courage to put up your hand and say, I'm not okay, and I really respect that. So if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I got a phone call from George today. Hey, I've got this problem with my husband. I'll never see the woman
I was
again.
assuming George is the place.
Yeah, George
You
the
didn't get the
place.
first call
No,
from
not
George.
from George, that George.
Okay,
From
okay.
George
I was
the
wondering
place.
about
Just
George.
to say, hey, I'm having these problems with my husband. Somebody gave me your number. Please, can you give me some advice? I'm like, I was
Cool.
getting ready for the day. I'm like, sure. We had a 20-minute conversation, That's it. It's
Yeah.
just like hopefully that conversation leads to somebody being pointed in the right direction. So yeah, bethechangecoaching.co.za. And, other than that,
Or
just
they can contact.
they can contact
Us
you
via
guys.
our
I'm
website,
happy.
etc. I'll
I'm
always
happy
refer
for
you.
people to give up my telephone number. I only have one number.
I don't.
know.
I'm happy to give it out. I just don't want to be that person who gets you hassled after.
No, that's fine. And that's
wanna
the
give it
thing.
up.
She has boundaries. So
I do,
So it's all right.
which maybe you oaks don't have,
Yeah,
but
well.
We don't know what that is.
right, one of those things called boundaries. I'm available. There are lots of
Thank
good
you.
resources out there. A lot of people just don't know that they exist.
Well,
And if you're in a
hopefully now they
corporate, and you're struggling, speak to HR or OD and say to them, hey, do we have an EAP? Do we belong to a wellness program? Is, there's some stuff going on. Again, HR should maintain that confidentiality. That's what they're there for.
Excellent.
And I don't just work with people who have substance use disorders. I work with people who just are looking to manage life better. And we all need a little
Yes,
bit
we
of
do.
that, right?
It's-
I'm off to my trauma counsellor tomorrow just for a top-up.
Yeah, that's an answer. Putting
Right?
it.
Just
But
a
yeah, no,
top-up.
but that's it. Life does need managing. You want, all of our lives need managing, and sometimes it means someone else must help us.
Right. And it's like I say, we just got to keep on having the conversations, and then hopefully things start to slowly but surely, start to change. Especially, you guys see some of the dark side of life, especially when the dark side of life exists. So,
But then again, we also see the bright side thereafter
right.
sometimes.
Yeah, and
So
all
that's-
that porn.
Yeah, all that,
right?
that one that he sees.
I look at different porn.
Listen, I don't know. Somebody inadvertently shared their photo folder with me the other day to
Okay.
my work accounts, and it's like if you're going to take personal photographs and keep them on your drives, know what you're doing. That's all I've got to say,
exactly.
right?
Just-
Know what you're doing. Know how shared folders work. But
Yeah.
that's a story
That's-
for another day.
we'll have that that podcast one day.
Okay,
Leanne, again, thank you.
pleasure, great pleasure.
Been brilliant, Pierre.
This is for you.
Oh wow!
Just little.
As long as it's not a bottle of, is
well,
it a
no.
bottle of whiskey?
No, hold on a second. Here's the thing. As soon as we stopped, Pierre said to me, "Are we looking for the bottle store?" So I said, "No, this is
No.
This is one of those gifts that we have to keep it
Oh, damn.
non-alcohol, non-drug related."
Can I open it?
Of course
Yeah,
you can
please
open it.
do. Just a little something from us to say thank you.
Oh, wow,
and
that's beautiful. Thank you so
So,
much.
yeah.
Because I was like, is that a bottle of whiskey? Because it looks like a whiskey box.
No, and they're not with the alcohol chocolates either. So
Thank you. That's really kind of you. I would have done it just because I love to talk about this work. But I really appreciate it.
I know
this.
you do, and you've been brilliant at talking about it
Thank
and
you.
sharing it.
Thank you.
I think even our studio man over there is taken on board a whole lot of stuff. He's going to go home to his
studio
mates.
man.
And
Yeah, just, like, it's okay to not be okay. Like, we get ourselves into situations happen in our lives. Like,
it happens.
let's just let's get well and get on with it. But thank you for having
You're
me.
a star. Thank
Will
you.
you let me know when you've released the episode?
Yep, Pure let you do it. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And,
Fantastic.
then
Yeah,
we'll
it'd
make
be
sure
really
you
great.
get a copy and whatever else.
Super.
Cool.
And
Thanks,
then
guys.
for the rest of the listeners and for the viewers, if you want to go check out our platforms, we are the Boardroom Soldiers,
I love that.
and our website DNK is www.investigators.co.za. Pop us an email, stop by, let's have a chat. Until the next one.
Till the next one.
Lekker.
Thanks, folks.
Cheers.
Take care.
Ciao.
Be well.
Another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.